Hey y'all, hey, it's JJ Conway. Welcome to Building Wealth Together, where our goal is to help you walk in abundance and leave a legacy. It's Juice with JJ. This is where I keep you informed about scams, financial controversies, and money shenanigans so you can keep your cash flow out of their pockets and funding your dreams. Let's get into it.
Hey y'all, hey, it's your girl JJ Conway. I am back with part 2 of the Is Southwest Racist? And this is going to be a continuation of my story of being asked to move, and including what my recommendations would be for making sure that your staff does not appear to be making decisions about customer service based on race. So what happened in part 1, and if you didn't hear last week's Juice with JJ, I encourage you to go back and listen to it. But basically, I was on a Southwest flight. Southwest is one of those flights where you don't get a seat assignment. You choose your seat based on the priority order that you board. I had gotten a decent seat. Some lady got a horrible seat, and then she asked to move, so the flight attendant asked me to move. Well, I didn't want to move. There were plenty of seats that she could have taken if she didn't want to sit in the back. And so another guy moves. Well, that guy ended up coming next to me, and I found out, as I explained at the end of the last episode, I found out that the real reason she wanted to move wasn't just because she didn't want to sit by the bathroom, but was because the guy next to her was a big guy. She had selected a seat, or maybe the guy wasn't there at first, but she selected a seat next to somebody who was really, really big, or maybe he selected the seat in the middle because there was nothing else for him and he didn't want to walk all the way back to the middle of the plane where we were. For whatever reason, she was stuck next to this guy who was so big, as in can't put the armrest down big, spilling over into her side of the chair big. And if you've never been that big, there's a certain big that when you try to put the armrest down, it wiggles and wiggles around your fat and it works its way back up. Like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, she couldn't even have the aisle seat to herself because he couldn't get he couldn't keep the armrest down. So I get it. But at the same time, I am incensed. Remember, I'm big. The lady on the window across from me was big. The guy who moved to sit in between us was big. He was comfy. We weren't really in his space. Each of us had our own space. We all had our armrests down. But this flight attendant, the one who called me difficult because I didn't want to move when he didn't give me any reason to move except that somebody didn't want to sit in the back, he wanted me, a big girl, to move to the back of the plane to sit next to somebody so that this older, thin, white lady didn't have to sit next to such a big guy. Now I'm deciding before I get up and get all up in my feels, let me get up and go to the bathroom. I use my trip to the bathroom as an excuse to scope out if there were other empty seats. Oh my. There's an empty middle seat 3 rows up caddy corner for me. There's another one in front of them and another middle seat 2 rows behind me. I don't know if there were any other empty seats on the plane, but the people sitting in those seats were all much more slender than me and my roommates. The flight attendant never asked any of them to move. He asked me. He didn't ask somebody who would have fit better back there. He asked me, who was big. And instead of asking them when I said no, he huffed at me for not moving, called me difficult, told the passenger who wanted to move that I was being difficult. Well, why couldn't he have asked any of the others? And why wouldn't he explain to the lady that it's first come, first served on Southwest? And if she wanted to move up and didn't want to sit where she was sitting, there were a couple of middle seats up ahead next to people who took up less space. Now, I know. Some of you listening are like, oh, here goes another black woman making everything about race. Actually, I guess most people who would think that probably dropped off my podcast when they heard last week me talking about stand your ground rules for black and brown and beige women not getting out of the way just because somebody else wants to encroach on your space, right? Okay, anyway, if you are thinking that, then yes, you need to know that is exactly what I'm doing. Because whether or not it was intentional, that is how it feels. Because those with empty middle rows, the ones he never asked to move, those seats were all held by white people and one Asian grandma who was married to a white man. The woman he moved was white. I was black and my 2 roommates were black. There were no other black people in a 10-ish radius row around us, right? So there may have been at the front of the plane, but around us, there were no other black people. And when I resisted moving, rather than asking any of these other people who had an empty middle seat, he huffed about me being difficult and told the lady I'd been difficult. Let that sink in. How would you feel if a flight attendant told another passenger that you were being difficult and that they almost weren't able to fulfill that passenger's request because of your obstinance? He never even asked anybody else. And there were several other people who would have been a better fit back there than me. And besides, the way I look at it, the lady could have moved up to a middle seat between two slender people. There were several. Then everybody would have been comfortable. It's not my fault that she didn't do what the rest of us do on a Southwest flight. I mean, if we care about getting a good seat, you set an alarm for 24 hours out, which is when you can check in, or we buy the upgraded seat assignment. I did what I had to do to check in on time. I set my alarm so I could check in 24 hours like you're supposed to and got a better seat. Other people paid for early access and early check-in to their seat, and she must not have done that. Maybe she didn't understand how Southwest works, but why does that have to be my problem? No one huffs when me and my son have to sit in different aisles. Nobody calls the people who won't move for us difficult. No one moves when I'm trying to get me and my husband together. Well, back before I learned how to check in early, or back when I couldn't afford to upgrade to be one of the first boarders, right? But now I'm difficult because I don't want to move so that this lady could be accommodated for no other reason than the guy next to her was big and I'm big. So you're not okay with her sitting next to a big guy? That was a troubling situation brewing because she didn't do what it took to get a better seat choice, but you're okay with me moving to the back and sitting in that same seat? I mean, I'm absolutely going to make that about race, even if it wasn't about race. The optics of all three black people and our back half of the plane crammed into one row is a really bad look for Southwest Airlines. Now, if he had asked others, or if he had said that the others were being difficult too, nobody wants to move, well, then I probably wouldn't ascribe race to it. And if his supervisor, the senior flight attendant, hadn't just stood there observing all this and then ignoring my concerns, I wouldn't label it an airline problem. I'd label it an individual problem. This guy's a jerk. But the minute you, senior flight attendant, are aware of the situation, stood there listening to him telling this passenger that I was difficult, and then don't take action to either de-escalate or apologize for the situation when I bring it up to you, now you are complicit. And the fact that you feel safe being complicit and the guy next to me is worried about losing his job if I say anything, that is an organizational problem. Oh, y'all, once we landed, I really wanted to be the last person off and hold up their ability to load the next flight by making sure they heard my side of this story. It really would have been satisfying to force them all to hear how I interpreted the optics of what just happened. I might even have turned on my recorder just to get their response on tape. Now, those of you who subscribed for a while, you know I'm not just blowing smoke. I mean it. I stand against injustice all day long, and I am quick to point out when I feel like somebody needs some education on how they mistreat people. But A, we were delayed 40 minutes, and I was really in a rush to get off the plane. I had a tight timeline to get to where I needed to go. And B, I figured it really wouldn't have changed anything anyway. They'd already written me off as an angry black woman. When I got off the plane, I saw a black female flight attendant at the entrance. I'm not sure if she was part of our flight. I don't usually see Southwest flights with 4 flight attendants, or if maybe she was just somebody who was working the gate and just then hopped on. I don't know, but I really, really wish I'd have had the time to talk to her about this situation and see if she felt comfortable enlightening her supervisor and coworkers. Probably not, though. I discovered this when I did a search. If you do a search on Southwest racist treatment of passengers, you will find story after story of horrific treatment when people of color ask for seat accommodations to sit next to their family members. You'll also find racism in the treatment of employees as well. This explains why the guy next to me, the one who moved, didn't want me to call out these people. He said it wasn't worth it. He's got a good job and wants to keep it. So if you're a business owner today, especially if you are a white business owner who doesn't understand why this situation upset me, or if you're tired of people making quote unquote everything about race, let me give you a few training pointers that you can give to your staff. First of all, just because a black woman doesn't want to do what you want her to do doesn't mean she's being difficult. You should treat her the same as you treat other passengers. Don't just tell me you already do, but actually watch Undercover Boss style and make sure. I have watched several business travelers like myself on other flights, wearing suits like myself, working on things like myself, tell the attendants no, they won't move when they've been asked to move to accommodate somebody else. And I have never seen attendants call them difficult or badmouth them to another passenger. Second, if you really need somebody to move, let the passenger you want to move know the valid reason for them to do so. Hint, hint, somebody just doesn't want to sit next to a big guy. That's not a valid reason. It may be a valid reason to her, but for other people who did what they had to do to get their good seat on the plane, that's not a valid reason. Now, if there had been a bona fide reason, for example, she had medical concerns and needed to get off the plane sooner, or if she had been part of the large family in the 2 rows in front of me, well, then maybe I might have been convinced to move, because I like to help families out and I care about medical necessities, right? Third, if you're having trouble getting people to move, wait. Actually, third would be ask everyone who has an empty seat next to them, would they move? Not just the black lady and then label her difficult for not moving, right? So number 4 would be, if you're having trouble getting people to move, and I don't know that attendant would have had trouble getting people to move. There were at least 3 other empty middle seats with thinner people that even if they didn't move, the older lady could have been comfortable. But let's just say none of us wanted to move, then perhaps employees should be empowered to sweeten the pot with an accommodation. Like, hey, we'd like you to move from your good seat to the back. Here's a love voucher for your kindness or some free drink tickets. Or since I abstain from alcohol, a premium Wi-Fi voucher. Something to say, we appreciate you, rather than, hey, we're entitled to you inconveniencing yourself for someone else for no reason, and we're going to call you difficult and uncooperative if you don't. And finally, train your staff not to talk bad about one customer in front of the other, especially if they're sitting right there. This whole situation shouldn't have happened. And I suspect if I were blonde-haired and blue eyes, this whole situation wouldn't have happened. Even if they asked me and they thought I was wrong, they probably wouldn't have talked bad to me to the other lady with me sitting right there. First, he shouldn't have asked me to move. He should have asked all of us to move. He should have asked her to take one of the empty middle seats, but since he decided to try and help her out, he should have asked everybody, not just the overweight black woman. And again, the only reason being overweight comes into it because the whole reason this very slender white woman was moved up is because she didn't want to sit next to a big guy. See, if it had been another big woman sitting next to a big guy, or if the slender woman was sitting next to a slender guy, I wouldn't bring weight into it. But you're moving her because the guy she's sitting next to is big and she doesn't feel like she has enough space. So what in your mind makes you think I'm going to feel like I have enough space? You knew I wasn't going to have enough space, and you're mad at me for not moving anyway. Y'all, I'll tell you what, when I found out the reason why, I was so glad I didn't move. But the thing is, this is a training point because things like this happen over and over and over and over and over. And you wonder why some of your clients, why some of your customers, why some of your coworkers seem to have such a chip on their shoulder, is because they have to deal with these things over and over and over and over. And so since this guy decided to try and help her out, he should have asked everybody. And if he was only going to ask one person and that person, who was me, refused, he shouldn't have mentioned it to the other passenger. Now, we'll never know if this was really about race or if the junior guy and the senior flight attendant were just having a bad day. Regardless, you can see by now how it looked, and you can apply that lens to your business and your dealings. I hope today's podcast has opened up some eyes and given everybody some ideas of how they can train their employees to handle some awkward situations and maybe even avoid creating these kinds of situations in the future. I'm JJ Conway. I want to thank you for being here with me today. Y'all take care and be blessed.
Love the podcast? Be sure to like, subscribe, and forward to 3 friends. You can ask a question or take a life-changing class at buildingwealthtogether.com. Now, go walk in abundance and leave a legacy.